spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples today. Welcome to Totally Lit, the podcast celebrating reading, writing and creating literature. I'm your host, Ky Garvey. Thank you for listening. Jenny Valentish, welcome to Totally Lit.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I am super excited to chat with you. This is kind of like a full circle moment for me. You first came across my radar at the Rock and Roll Writers Festival. I think it was 2017 or 18.
Yeah,
you
they ran
were a
it for a few
presenter
years.
there. Yes, and
I
I was a
loved it.
little volunteer helping with just a little dream of writing. So it's kind of a thrill now to be interviewing so many amazing authors that I saw at like events like that and go, oh,
Yeah,
that's
what
kind
a
of cool.
great festival that was. It was
Yes.
such a great thing to bring to Brisbane.
It was fantastic. And I met so many great people at that event, like Nikki McWatters, yourself. I think I probably just walked past you. I was probably too shy to say hello at that stage.
I saw Nikki last week because I had my Sydney launch and she came down from the Blue Mountains.
Amazing.
It was a great reunion. I actually see her every time I have a book launch. She's super
Lovely.
generous and coming along to everything.
She's amazing. She's been a guest on the show as well, which was cool for me. And she actually inspired me because when I first met her at the Rock and Roll Writers Festival, she had just won the Grieve writing competition through the Hunter Writers Centre. And I was like, oh, I can give that a shot, and submitted something and I placed third. So I didn't quite get to the top, but
That's still placing.
That was pretty cool for my first go at something.
Yeah.
So thank you to Leanne, who organised the Rock and Roll Writers Festival, because it really helped me with my writing, just that experience. Anyway, now we're here to chat about your latest book, which I feel like it was written for me, to be honest. And possibly when people look at you, Jenny, they wouldn't think that you find it challenging to be social. Do you want to tell us why you wrote the book?
Yeah, well, The Introvert's Guide to Leaving the House was originally called Does Not Play Well with Others.
Oh.
And yeah, and it wasn't a self-help book, which it pretty much is now, although it's a kind of memoir self-help hybrid. It was more of a sort of a deep dive into social reluctance and why people might kind of want to opt out or feel guarded around other people. And then when I took it to a firm press, because they have a really big self-help arm, they said, oh, we'd really like to kind of push it in that direction. And so it was renamed The Introvert's Guide to Leaving the House, but it's got a bit of a long tagline to try and cover quite a few things. So solid advice for introverts, awkward, sociophobes, and stand-offishes.
Yes.
And I
covers
tick all those
everybody.
boxes. Yeah. And I wrote it because I wanted to sort of explore my own kind of social reluctance and why that was. Nature, nurture, what else is going on, your origin story, all sorts of things, if you're neurodivergent, if that has a role to play. So it casts a wide net and it goes down a lot of weird rabbit holes, which I found so enjoyable. I mean, I love just doing research and getting thrown off track.
And you're halfway through a book tour at the moment. Have you been getting much feedback from readers on the book yet?
Yeah, the feedback actually, interestingly, is that extroverts and non-introverts, because that can also include omniverts and ambiverts, are really getting something out of it too, which is, really what you want. So I've had feedback from, for instance, somebody who's experienced profound grief that she just related to so many of the exercises that I personally set myself when I was tackling social anxiety and social reluctance when I was younger. And I think it's just that idea of sometimes there comes a point in our life where we may want to assess and analyze our behaviors, see what's working, chuck out what isn't, and reframe some things. So anybody who's been through that, which is most of us, could find that it strikes a chord.
It's interesting. I'm halfway through my life at the moment, and I do
Right, you
acknowledge.
don't know that.
No. Well, potentially I could be at the end of my life, but no. I'm assuming I'm middle-aged, so I'm halfway through my life. And I definitely have some social anxiety issues, but don't feel when I'm in the peak of that anxiety that I'm able to control it. Like I'm still behaving in the same way and not able, feeling that I can't break those habits or change that behavior because I'm too heightened in the moment of it.
Yeah.
If you understand what I mean. And so I find it
Yeah, yeah.
really interesting, those people that can look at themselves and really identify those feelings and figure out how to change them.
Well,
Um,
if you think of the tenets of mindfulness, and my book isn't about mindfulness, but if you think of it, it's about kind of identifying what's going on for you, possibly naming it,
mm,
and sort of seeing it as a thing separate to you that you can detach from, move along, reduce, or whatever you need to do to it. So in a way, we can do that with social anxiety. We can recognize different aspects of social anxiety and why they happen and what our own limitations are and what our strengths are. And, if there are certain scenarios that we find really difficult, like I find group chats, like going out with small groups, really difficult. And I'll just sink into silence. I'm not trying to, hammer out everything and fix in inverted commas everything. So I
yeah.
think if there's some things we find really tricky, then we can just sub that out and do something else, like meet people individually. Or another really key one is I think a lot of people with social anxiety find it hard sitting across from someone, making a lot of eye contact, sitting still. So if you could swap out face-to-face meetings for shoulder-to-shoulder activities where you and a friend go to a gallery or, just for a walk or whatever it is, game of pool. And then you're just both having the experience together and you can have a more sort of laid back conversation without that need to sort of jump up from the table that some of us have.
Yes. Yeah. I'm definitely a flight person. So the more uncomfortable I am in a situation, the more you'll find me trying to run away.
Yeah.
And so I will be sort of half saying goodbye and standing up and getting out of, if I'm really feeling ready to be gone. Um,
Same.
and it's
Oh, yeah.
nobody tells you about writing uh, that you do have to push yourself out to get your work noticed and to be engaging with people. And I'd really love to be like a writer that never went anywhere at all.
Yeah.
It's
And
like,
more
oh,
so
that
than
social
ever,
side is challenging.
because the industry's got so much harder for the publishers as well, in that costs have gone up and fewer people are reading books. They can take fewer risks. So they really need writers that can put themselves out there, that are
Mm.
like, yeah, set me to work. I'll do anything at press time. If so, even if you don't have a big social media following or following in general, which obviously they'd love, they would be looking for someone who won't shy away from stepping forth, if you like. So
Yeah.
it's,
Mm.
there's quite a few, well, there's two chapters in the book that look at that kind of thing. And they look at public speaking and they also look at how to cope in the age of the personal brand. Because,
Yes.
like, I'm Gen X. Are you Gen X? Or are
I'm
you
Gen
Gen
X.
Y?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we in particular, like, we were encouraged growing up not to sell out and not to put yourself out
Yeah.
there. Like, that was
Mm.
bad taste, man. So apart from the fact that we might not feel comfortable doing that anyway. It's been drummed into us not to, we weren't raised in the era of even duck face selfies like the generation
Mm.
below were. So there's a chapter on how to put yourself out there online without feeling like you're compromising yourself, which I think is really important, just to find something that works for you. So what works for me is to, first of all, even though I kind of have every platform going. I'm not really active on them all. Like, I do have accounts on X, Blue Sky, and TikTok and stuff, but I don't really use them. So I stick to one that I really like the best,
Mm.
which is Instagram. And I knew that even though I've written a self-help book, I personally would feel really uncomfortable talking to camera in a very earnest way and imparting advice. So instead of doing that, I do kind of skits with my partner and just really kind of deadpan anti-social skits, which kind of make fun of the fact that it's a self-help book for antisocial people rather than look like, I've fixed this now, guys. Look how confident I am. Like, that would make me die inside. So I think you've got to find something that really works for you.
Mm, mm. Well, interestingly enough, when I was Googling you this afternoon, the first thing that came up, it was Jenny Valentish books, Jenny Valentish husband, Jenny Valentish guardian. And I was like, oh, people are very interested in who your husband is.
I think, yeah, that's been because obviously I have Googled myself. That's been up there for decades, or like 10 years. I think if you Google most people, husbands will come up actually, but I don't have one. I
How
have
disappointing
in
for
the
all those
past, yeah,
people that have Googled you.
or promising, who knows? But no,
Well,
yeah,
I was
it's
wondering, oh, I wonder if they're just checking out Jenny Valentish. Number
yeah,
4 was age as well. And I'm like, what are people
really,
checking out?
really, I didn't know that. Oh well, for the record, I've turned 50.
No. Look how beautiful your
No,
skin is.
thank you. Look, I've Vaseline the lens.
That is a big, I find a lot of pressure before I go to an event now. I'm like, oh, is my hair frizzy? If I better make sure, like, because I'm a little bit round, so I'm like, oh, I need to make sure my tummy's always covered. So don't wear a shirt that's too short. And I've never thought that there would be pressure like that. And I'm just a picture book author. Like, nobody cares if I'm at an event or not. But when I see a photo of myself with someone, I'm like, oh, gee, put more thought before you leave the house.
Yeah, tell you what, one thing that you have to do as an author, which is a bit painful, but at the same time, I'm very grateful, is, you go around to the bookshops and you sign copies. They very nicely, take a picture of you signing copies. And sometimes you have to do a little piece to camera and stuff. And so you're just constantly under terrible lighting, holding up a copy of your book like a
Mm.
bit of an idiot and grinning for the camera. So yeah, there are little things that you do where you think, gosh, if only my book had been this absolute runaway success without any promotion or help, then I could just, be aloofly stay in my Jenny cave. But alas, we can't.
No, we have to go out into the world and talk to other people. Even I'm always leaving the house going, don't be weird, don't be weird, don't be weird. And without
I don't know if
fail,
that mantra helps.
I will say something weird. Well, they do say about you have to be careful about the way you manifest, because the way you word it, you can actually bring what you're
Mm.
trying not to
Yeah,
have
yeah,
happen. So I always feel like I'm apologizing out in the world where I've said something really weird. And I know I was at an event recently and I was saying how my husband and I joke, oh, well, we'll be dead soon. Like, it's all going to be over. And somebody gave me like a sideways look and I'm like, oh, they didn't get that joke.
yeah. But I think having a gallows humor is great. Introverts and people with social anxiety do tend to be overthinkers.
Yeah.
And also, they're always prepared for the absolute worst, not just the worst, but also second from worst, third from worst. Like, what's the whole gamut of, bad situations that could occur? So we're always prepared, aren't we?
It is kind of surprising how optimistic authors can be, in that we're constantly writing, we're constantly submitting with
Mm,
like, we think we will get published, so we keep trying, yet we're constantly opening our emails to rejections and just sort of dusting ourselves up.
yeah.
There's this whole cycle of rejection and interaction with people all the time where socially it's not great for our mental health, to be honest.
Yeah. And authors aren't necessarily the most robust people when it comes to rejection because we have to be overthinkers. We have to carry entire worlds in our heads on our own, and work on it alone. And so that does feel like rejection when you finally pitch something that you've put a lot of yourself into and it's turned back. I was actually part of a roundup from Kill Your Darlings this week where the
Oh,
subject was
yes, I saw that
rejection.
promoted. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was looking at it from a journalistic lens actually, because I'm a journalist, and people do tend to get quite dispirited if they get a rejection of a pitch. And I think, oh my gosh, probably 7 out of 10 pitches
Mm.
get rejected for me. And I've built up contacts over the years. It still happens. Sometimes I get no response at all. I just can't waste time sweating it or taking it personally. It's like, okay, right, I have to tweak it and move it along, move it along. I think we just have to understand that it's a tough industry out there, the book industry and the journalism industry. And it's about kind of like we have to make a pivot in the air like a cat and just think,
Mm.
okay, that didn't land, I'm going to land somewhere else, and just keep going.
I do think that we have to be resilient and treat it like a numbers game in a lot of
Mm.
ways. I think that dopamine hit you get from getting a yes is amazing, but it can be hard if it's years between those yeses
Oh yeah.
instead of like for some people they're getting traction every month kind of thing. But then there's some that have a much larger gap between yeses. Um,
Yeah, yeah. But not only that, but some people, sometimes it can seem like, oh my gosh, it's like the acting industry. It's like, oh, the same four people will get
yes.
columns, it seems
Mm,
like, or book deals. But it's pretty awful because I know people who are a bit older than me who used to have everything at their feet when it comes to writing gigs. And then it just happens as it does that new people came up and if they're not getting the same kind of invites and attention that they used to, and
mm,
it's really hard to swallow. So even people who are getting yeses at some point are going to get nos. So it's really about, I guess it's a Buddhist thing of attachment, right? So it's
mm.
to try not to attach your entire self-worth to
Yeah.
whether what you're putting out at the moment creatively is getting picked up or not.
Well, even separating your self worth from your work completely, in that just because you can write a good piece doesn't make you a good person or a liked person either. And also looking back at yourself and deciding what is your motivation to write? Are you writing because you want people to know who you are? Or are you writing because it's something you feel you have to do? Because some writers are just compelled to write. And so I hear some people write and never submit. They they just keep it for themselves. And I'm sort of like, oh, why would you bother? so so I definitely am compelled to, if I write something, it's for someone else to read.
Yeah, of course. Even as a kid, when like doing a drawing or something like you constantly do, I would have to turn that drawing into a card for blah blah. I mean, all kids do,
Mm,
but there's got to be a purpose and someone
yeah.
to validate it at the end, right? Yeah, I don't know many people who just make music or write without showing it to anyone. I
Mm,
think usually if somebody doesn't show people, it's because they're afraid rather than, no, I'm fine not putting this out there. But I teach memoir, and the reason most people who I work with write is because they weren't really heard growing up,
yes.
and they've
Mm,
never had their things that are so important and painful to them. They've never had them acknowledged or validated, and they've grown. Maybe they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s now, and they've given these things a lot of thought, and they're experts on the topic of whatever it is that ails them. So they've got a lot to share, and they probably realize that this book that they're writing could be a lifeline for someone like them
mm.
had it been available to them. So I think that's a big motivation for people.
Well, it can be very healing to put things down on paper, but I think too sometimes the things that you're sharing about yourself, people have opinions on them as well. So you've got to be prepared for, I guess, the commenting and response to what you're sharing. And then that's a whole other level of resilience that you need to
Yeah,
have as well, especially if you're sharing something that might be a bit controversial or
yeah,
polarizing, I guess. So that can be, I guess, what holds some people back from writing some of their
yeah.
personal experiences.
I mean, I I wrote a memoir called Women of Substances, and you don't really hear people being critical per se because where and how are they going to do that? The thing that would bug me a bit was more, I'd get quite often, oh, that's brave, but in a
Yes.
tone that implied,
Mm,
I can't believe you would hang your dirty laundry out like that. But that's as far as any
mm,
negative comments went. It's just, yeah, some people find it distasteful that you Well, they find memoir distasteful, don't they?
Yeah.
I'm a real big fan of Kate Spicer.
Hmm.
You can look her up on Substack, and I actually used to write for her in the 90s when she edited a magazine called Minx in the UK. And then she had a Sunday Times column, and she writes for the Daily Mail sometimes in the UK, like columns. But she's got a Substack where she's written about, this the end of a 15-year relationship and being having ADHD and really sort of struggling to stay afloat.
Mm.
And as she's writing it each week, she writes about the kind of feedback she's getting, and it's from friends or acquaintances usually who are just like, why would you do that? Do you think you're oversharing? Why would you put yourself out there to that extent? So it's not like something specific, I think, would get singled out and attacked to your face. It's
Mm.
more that some people have a distaste of oversharing,
Yeah,
if
well,
you want
I
to call it
think
that.
your friends and family also are concerned for your welfare, and they're sort of like, oh, do you think maybe that one you should keep to yourself?
Or concern for their welfare.
I share a lot about I'm a carer to two sons with autism, but I'm always trying to be mindful of only sharing my own experience, and trying
Yeah,
to be respectful to them, because I'm like, oh, actually, this is not just my story. They're living it as well. There's
yeah,
some stories that I can't necessarily share because it's not respectful for them. I'm so really thinking about, okay, if I want to write something, how do I convey that without, I guess, betraying their trust in me as well?
yeah.
So
Yes, I
sometimes
think
you're
that's the
sharing things that it's not your story necessarily to tell sometimes.
well, they do overlap, don't they? No woman is an island. But I think that's
Mm.
the biggest concern of anyone who wants to write about themselves is how to navigate that. And you get such varying opinions on that. Helen Garner has said, well, I've never been as hard on anyone as I have been myself,
Mm.
which I don't know if it would be any comfort to them. Even so,
No.
Catherine Devaney, who I often work with giving memoir workshops, she says if people don't want to be written about negatively, they should have behaved better.
Yes.
Green, I think, said to be a writer, you should have a splinter of ice in your heart. But I'm more along your lines, where when I wrote my memoir, I gave all chapters ahead of time that had family or my ex in it to them to read.
Mhm.
And I said I'd make any changes, which is a bit of a risk because, you could end
Well,
up
if it's a
feeling really
crucial
angry.
story, you
Yeah.
want it to stay in, don't you?
But they didn't ask for any changes. But I had also held back quite a bit. And I found that to hold back on things that would explain to the outer world, this is why I am the way I am, which is kind of what you want to be understood when you write memoir. To hold back on crucial things because you don't want to overstep someone else's boundary,
Mm.
it does make you feel like, this is my one shot at the world understanding me, and I have to rein it in and not give things away. So actually, I found that super stressful when I was writing the book. It made me feel really angry, even though it was my decision. I wasn't
Yeah.
telling the full story.
That could be quite constraining, couldn't it? To be
Mm,
wanting to tell a story that you just can't tell, but
yeah,
then also identifying why you want to tell it and why you want people to understand who you are as a person. And it's like, oh,
yeah, yeah.
why do I need that as
I think there's
well?
multiple reasons really, and
Mm.
one is because I have laboured at my craft, and
Yes.
I think I can put a really good product, for want of a better word, out there. Another is to be a lifeline, but there's always a selfish one too, which is a deep down, it's a deep-seated childhood need for something. I mean, I
Yeah.
love that Madonna has she's so been so open about how she didn't get enough attention as a child, and her entire career has been about getting that attention that she didn't have because she came from a large Catholic family. So I think there's always something very personal about putting a book out. It's not all about doing the world a service, is it?
Mm. I'm just thinking, I'm the opposite of Madonna. I'm an only child. I got too much attention when I was growing up. So no, I couldn't get into any mischief. There was no no room for it. But I guess as an adult, I'm free to get into as much mischief as I like.
Yeah, but I mean, if you have that kind of micromanaging, which I did as well, then you can't necessarily express yourself because there's a lot of control and expectation. So
I think
maybe you
it
need to express
sometimes
yourself later.
takes you a long time to identify who you are as a
Yeah.
person as well when you haven't had any boundaries to really break against because you haven't been able to try anything in life. You get to an
Yeah.
adult not really knowing who you are, and so it takes you a bit
Yeah.
longer.
And writing's a sense-making exercise, isn't it? Memoir. I mean, we write to desperately try and figure things out. That's why the first draft's called the vomit draft, because it's so, it's just like a huge purge all over the paper and hurt feelings and knee-jerk reactions and bits of dialogue that we've scribbled down in a rage sometimes. So, it's all it's all trying to piece things together and then maybe leave it for a spell and then come back to it and have the great gift of being able to see it with a bit more distance, which if we just kept it all in our heads is much harder to do.
I think it must be because I haven't written memoir at all, to be honest, but that reliving of those experiences must be interesting and getting perspective on how you felt and what actually happened, because often what we're experiencing and the way we're feeling about it changes as we grow as well and we
Yeah,
have
yeah.
more experiences. So it must be an interesting process to look back on all of those and identify what you really felt and how you feel about things now.
Yeah, and I think you really have to have a strong, like a real certain end date in mind. Like, I'm
Mm.
going to end this story at the point where I turned X or, X year, so that it doesn't become this big galloping mess into the present day where you haven't processed things yet. So my memoir was largely set in the 90s, actually, so I'd had plenty of time to figure things out. But also, I wrote about 100,000 words in 2009 when I quit drinking and then left it, or at least barely touched it, for about 7 years, and then decided to write a memoir. And I don't think I used any of that draft, but I knew I'd got all the stuff. I'd got down how I felt at the time, which was super raw. And then 7 years later, I was able to go, all right, I'm going to now look at that story with the wisdom of someone who hasn't drunk for 7 years and has done a lot of work.
And did you find from that writing of the first draft when you were just becoming sober, did you, was it a different experience again when you sat down that 7 years later to write it?
Yeah, it had a completely different take on things. It was a lot more, I felt a lot more self-pity then,
Mm,
a lot more resentment. I was really like gobbled up by AA. I went for about 18 months and I didn't really, it wasn't great for me as an introvert, to be honest. I didn't
mm,
enjoy it. But at the same time, it sucks you into this kind of whole other world of slogans and mottos and people who've been maybe in the rooms, as they're called, for up to 30 years. And you're like, oh my God, I did not know this whole existence was here.
mm.
And so it was a very different book from, you know, the perspective of 12 step and the perspective of still being full of resentment.
Mm.
So it would
And
have been
now again,
shitty to read for other people. If people would have picked up on, you've got to be a reliable narrator, haven't you? You can't be a
mm,
reliable narrator if you're still processing stuff.
yes, true. And now that, do you think if you sat down and wrote something again, would it be a different piece again?
No, I feel that those 7 years I took off and before the next draft, I feel like my view now would be the same as it was then. So that's good. That makes me feel okay. You waited the right amount of time. No,
Yep.
nothing's changed.
Mm. And so if people would like to work with you at any of your workshops, have you got anything coming up?
I basically do something called Well, I do 6-week writers groups, which are on Sundays, and they're 4 people per group. So they're ongoing like forever. And if I get a whole big surge of interest every now and then, I go, okay, well, I'll do two. I'll do a midweeker as well.
Yep.
Apart from that, though, I mainly do one-to-ones. I do have workshops, And every now and then I've got a Facebook group called Sundays We Write, which anyone can join. Every now and then I go, right, we've got enough people to do a memoir workshop. We've got enough people to do a feature writing workshop. And if there's enough interest, I'll do one. Otherwise, people can just do one-to-one Zooms with me, which I really enjoy. And I like, I can either read the stuff beforehand and we can troubleshoot anything that's going on for people with their manuscripts, or just work on ideas from scratch, or even I love doing live editing where I share my screen. They give me something that they're working on and I edit it and explain what I'm doing. But yeah, really enjoy that. I love teaching.
It's been great learning for someone to be watching that live as well.
I hope so. Yeah. Because I edited magazines for 8 years and was a sub-editor. And so, I know
you've got
how
the
to
skill.
tighten and tighten and get all that grammar snapping into shape.
And have you helped craft some books from scratch to publication?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're from scratch because people came to my writers' groups or to me because I have a manuscript editing service with, maybe half a manuscript or a rough draft, but there's been a few. So Shauna Smith has written an addiction memoir called Going Under, and that came out with Ventura. And then in 2 weeks, I'm launching the book of Samantha Byers, and it's a brilliant novel called Dead Ends, and it's coming out with University of Queensland Press. And I first saw that when she brought it to my 6-week writers groups, and then I did a manuscript assessment. So there's been a few. There's been one more as well, which has just escaped my mind, actually.
More to come. That's very exciting. I have joined your Facebook group.
Great,
I'm not sure if I'm ready to be a memoir writer yet. I've got to move past short stories and picture books.
Why? They're completely valid just on their own. You don't need expanding into.
That is true. That they attract many talented people. That I have a goal. I want a novel of some sort. Just trying to create the time is the challenge. I'm still stuck in the world of full-time work.
Yeah.
Podcasting, which takes up a lot of time.
It does.
And just submitting and being involved with the Kid Lit community. And I'm like, I just need to figure out how to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And, often it can be a slow burner that you start and just keep coming back to over a decade. I mean, if you're enjoying it, then the time is not a drama.
And I think being realistic about what the time frame is of actually creating a novel.
Yeah, that's what I meant, the time frame. Yeah. Yep.
So watch this space in 10 years, maybe.
Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Jenny. I've enjoyed chatting to you, and I will keep an eye out for you. You are at some events at Avid Reader here in Brisbane, which I'll keep an eye out for. And I think the next thing after that, you're in Castlemaine.
Yeah.
You're bouncing
and then I'm
across
ghostwriting a book after that. It should be an interesting palate cleanser. I've got 3 months to ghostwrite someone's book. I've never done it before, so it'll be exciting.
I think that is definitely a writing path for some people to do ghostwriting as well.
Oh, it's how you make some money to fund your own next book, frankly. Yeah.
and there are people who have a story to tell, but then they need someone to help them get it out to the world. So ghostwriting is a great way to do it. I know a few that do ghostwriting, but I'm like, I don't think I could take the pressure.
It really depends on the client, doesn't it? It really depends on the client and, what they like to work with.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jenny. I appreciate it. And I look forward to your launch.
Brilliant. Looking forward to seeing you.
Totally Lit is an independent podcast. You can help support us to continue to chat with wonderful Australian creatives by leaving a review on iTunes or sharing our socials with your friends. You can also make a contribution at www.buymeacoffee.com/Totally Lit. This will also help with equipment and podcasting platform fees. I love to interact with our listeners, so feel free to say hello either by email or social media at totallylitpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find me on Facebook Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn and Twitter, and now Blue Sky. I've also created a group on Facebook called the Totally Lit Writing Community. It's a space to continue the conversation and share your writing successes, events, launches, and latest projects. Jump into the group and say hello. Thank you for listening to Totally Lit, and don't forget to go out into the world to read, write, create, ignite.